Hey, kiddos, here we are, starting all over again. Well, not really. We're on chapter 26. Chapter 26 of what? Chapter 26 of The Chaplains and Clergy of the Revolution that was published by J.T. Headley, compiled and published by him when? 1864. 1864. Now, isn't that interesting? And I'm delighted all of you are joining me as well as we continue to read, and I read to my grandchildren virtually this wonderful, fabulous, even better than wonderful, fabulous book put together by J.T. Headley on the truth that is not taught anywhere else on the chaplains and clergy of the Revolution. So let's go ahead and get on with it. And this is chapter 26, Charles Cummings. And here's what we're going to read about today. And so pay attention into this chapter so we get an understanding. An Irishman by birth, settles in Virginia, enters the ministry, fights the Indians, goes armed to his church. Wow. Takes the lead in the political movement of the people. Chaplain to the army in the expedition against the Cherokees, and his death. Well, that's interesting. Two things, that I make my commentary, and I will. There's just no way I'm not going to be able to talk or read a book, just read the book. I have to make my commentary. And two things is one, an Irishman by birth. Nana would really, that sticks for her. Yeah, go girl. And then he takes and fights the Indians. He goes armed to his church. There's so many churches nowadays that are anti-firearms. It's sickening. And then more. He takes the political lead in the movements of the people. So let's hear what this is. Okay. Charles Cummings was an Irishman by birth, but coming in early manhood to this country, received his theological education here. He located in Virginia, where he studied divinity, and being licensed to preach in 1767, settled at North Mountain, Augusta County. In 1772, he received a call from the people of Holston, embracing the congregations of Sinking Springs and Ebbing Spring. At this time, the Indians were very troublesome in the neighborhood, and during the summer months, the people were obliged to collect in forts for safety. In 1776, Mr. Cummings' family being in one of the forts, he, with a servant and wagon and 3 neighbors, went one day to a farm not far distant on an errand, when they were attacked by a party of Indians. The first intimation they had of the presence of the savages was a volley from the woods bordering the road, which tumbled the driver from his seat. Mr. Cummings and his companions immediately returned the fire, and a sharp skirmish followed. In a few minutes, however, 2 of the neighbors fell mortally wounded. The Indians being under cover, Mr. Cummings saw that to remain longer where they were would be certain death, and turning to his servant, told him to follow him, and leading the way, charged boldly into the bushes. The savages, surprised at the sudden onset, broke cover with a fierce yell. They did not flee, however, but turned furiously on their assailants. At this critical moment, when his fate seemed hopeless, Mr. Cummings heard a shout in the road near him. Those in the fort had heard the firing, and knowing at once that the little party was attacked, hastily sent out a detachment to its relief. Coming up on return, it had arrived just as the Indians turned on Mr. Cummings and his servant. It soon finished the unequal fight. The war with the mother country, which had already commenced, set the entire frontier in a blaze, and the congregation of Mr. Cummings found themselves so surrounded with dangers that when they assembled for worship on the Sabbath, they locked up their houses and took their family with them to church. All along the beautiful valley, groups would be seen, the men armed, slowly and cautiously gathering to the house of prayer. Last of all came the pastor, mounted on his dun horse, his rifle on his shoulder, and his ammunition belt buckled to his side. Arriving at the meeting house, he would fasten his horse to a tree and take a short walk by himself, wrapped in meditation. When the congregation was all assembled, each man seated with his rifle by his side, he would enter the church, and walking solemnly through the double line of steel mounts mounted the steps of the pulpit, and standing his rifle in the corner, lay aside his powder flask and commence the service of the day. He took a leading part in all patriotic movements of his congregation, and when the freeholders of Fincastle County met to consult on the measures they should adopt in the perilous condition of affairs, he was the first man named on the committee appointed to draw up an address to the Continental Congress. He was also chairman of the Committee of Safety of Washington County, known throughout the entire region for his daring courage as well as for his sterling piety. When the First Army was organized to penetrate Tennessee and attack the Cherokees, he was chosen its chaplain and shared all the perils and hardships of that march through the wilderness. He died in 1812 in the 80th year of his age. That's the end of this. Very short chapter compared to some of the other ones. Really amazing. But here it is. He saw no disparity between taking and fighting, no disparity in taking and charging out against an attacking enemy. No disparity whatsoever, children, in carrying his firearms and making sure that all of his parishioners had their firearms. No disparity in doing that which was to establish this nation under God. We'll take and move to the next chapter in a few minutes.